A country that no one could find on a map 3 years ago has become one of the most contentious political issues of the day. And people are saying Donald Trump is making things worse. But what should Christians believe about the war in Ukraine? I'm going to discuss that on this edition of The Deep End. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Tim. This is Tim Hatch Live, and this is The Deep End, where we talk about the news of the day through a pastoral worldview. And if you are here for the first time, consider giving us a like, a subscribe, thumbs up, whatever. If you want to wait until the end of the content, that's great too, because news is breaking all the time, and we need to discuss it through the lens of Scripture. How does Scripture speak to these realities? Well, I don't know if you were watching the news as I was. I'm a news junkie, and I saw the dust-up that went down between President Zelensky of Ukraine, President Trump, and Vice President Vance of America as they met for what should have been a happy photo op before a mineral deal was signed that would benefit both parties. The mineral deal would have staked America's business interest in Ukraine and given President Trump a rationale for supporting the country going forward. Now, you have to remember that President Trump, at the end of the day, is a businessman. He always has been a businessman. So he sees diplomacy between nations through the lens of, is it good for business? Well, a final question led to an explosive argument between the three men. And in my opinion, Zelensky blew a chance to further his own nation's security with America's help. Watch.
In the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this.
I'm not dictating.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war,
you're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
I'm not playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
Yeah,
you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
And things went from bad to worse in that meeting. Zelensky left the White House without having signed the mineral deal, and then he flew to Europe to make friends with European leaders to continue the war that is still going on 3 years later in Ukraine between Russia and that country. Well, last week, President Trump held a joint session of Congress where he addressed the leaders of our nation, and Democrats adamantly opposed clapping or standing for anything in Trump's speech because he said it. Literally, that's the level of hostility now that we see in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, between the Democrats and the Republicans. And it goes both ways, but the Democrats were particularly entrenched in not applauding when they did not even applaud for a freed American hostage that Trump announced, or a high school student that was accepted into the United States Military Academy, or the apprehension of a terrorist that killed Americans in Afghanistan, or a murdered college student who had a state park named after her, or a pediatric cancer survivor who was named a member of the U.S. Secret Service. They stood for none of it, but they did clap for one thing that Trump mentioned, and that, of course, had to do with the money we've sent to Ukraine. Here's how that went down. Watch.
The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything.
So that's the Democrats clapping.
Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
Okay, so that's the level of decorum at the highest levels of government in our nation. It's pretty bad when you can only clap for a continued war in a country, again, no one could find on a map 3 years ago. Well, Zelensky, again, flew to Europe to meet with European leaders and thereby bolster the continued war effort by getting Britain and France to start contributing to the bill that is escalating as this conflict continues. Now, the debate over the U.S. involvement in this continued conflict is like every other debate. It divides us, and it is usually centered on Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is for it, his haters are against it. If Donald Trump is against it, his haters are for it. And we never go any further than that, sad to say. So in this video, I want to talk to Christians. Yeah, Christians. Should we have the facts? Yeah. Should we therefore know the facts? and make a decision based on the facts about whether or not this Ukraine support thing is really in line with Scripture and Christianity and true faith? Yeah, we should make that determination, but we need to do so based on the facts. I want to talk about the problem with supporting Ukraine from a Christian worldview. Number one, you need to know that Ukraine suppresses Christians. An entire denomination, historic denomination of Christianity in Ukraine is presently suppressed under President Zelensky's leadership. About 2/3 of Ukraine's 43 million people identify as Eastern Orthodox Christians. They are either attending the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church or the newly formed Orthodox Church of Ukraine that was formed in 2019. More on that later. But in May of 2022, the UOC, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the historical Christian denomination in the country, formally severed ties with the Russian Orthodox Church because of the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. Yet despite this, Zelensky banned that church's religious activities, restricting millions from attending their churches, seeking prayer from their pastors, or even gathering with members of their lifelong faith community. Back in November 2023, Bob Amsterdam, representing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, says Zelensky's treatment of the denomination was a suppression of truth and religion. He is right. So, if you're taking notes, 5 years ago, the Ukrainian government starts a new competing church aimed at taking membership from the Russian-tied Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And 3 years ago, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church severs ties with the Russian Orthodox Church, and yet they are the ones who are suppressed and shut down at the hands of the government. So, religious persecution at the hands of Zelensky and Ukrainian leadership? Check. But that's not all. You also need to understand that Zelensky suppresses dissent, as in political dissent. He doesn't want opponents voicing any concerns about his leadership, and he makes sure to do so with a couple of tactics. Number one, he has taken great measures against his political rivals in the country that some Americans are convinced is a bastion for democracy. In 2022, Zelensky banned the largest political opposition party in the country. This is the Opposition Platform for Life, a party which had 43 members in the nation's parliament at that time. But wait, there's more. In February 2025, Zelensky imposed sanctions on former President Poroshenko, accusing him of high treason and assisting a terrorist organization. Poroshenko was the leader of the opposition European Solidarity Party. And Zelensky not only banned the Communist Party in Ukraine, but seized assets from its members. Not very democratic. And it should be particularly concerning if you're on the Democratic left in this country. Political persecution, check. Religious persecution, check. But wait, there's more. Zelensky also invoked the emergency powers law and martial law to consolidate a national television channel into a unified information policy broadcast organization. So he controls the news by shutting down other news outlets under emergency powers because of the continued war that is escalating and not dying down by any measure as of this moment. In favor of continued power being held onto by Zelensky in Ukraine, you have to understand that there are no elections in Ukraine for as long as the war continues. Now, that's very convenient for a man who has silenced his opponents, suppressed the church, consolidated the news outlets, and is currently in charge of all of it. See, Ukraine operates like a totalitarian state, a government that no one in this country would ever tolerate. We would not, despite our political differences, tolerate the suppression of political rivals, the persecution of the church, or control of the media at the hands of one political outlet. I mean, not to say that some people haven't tried to do that in this country. It's just that the electorate eventually wins back the rights of its citizenship. But here's the kicker for Zelensky in Ukraine. If the war ends, all of this is over. And you have to keep that in mind. Not just his power, but the money. The money for who? Zelensky, sure, but also some European weapons manufacturers and American weapons manufacturers, at least until Trump got elected into office. You see, this is a common conflict when it comes to war. There are some companies, there are some industries who will profit off of the continued conflict. And for whatever you think, I need you to hear me say this. Standing with Ukraine is not standing for democracy. It is at this moment standing for top-down control with no elections, no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, and making sure that the guy at the top has a vested interest in continuing to bring money into his country. But again, every single issue has to be interpreted through the lens of whether or not Donald Trump is for it. And we find people in this country, in America, supporting one of the least democratic governments in existence right now. In fact, they even claim that Ukrainians are more American than Americans. Watch this clip on MSNBC.
The person who's watching, who just heard you say Donald Trump is not standing up for Ukraine, what do you say to the person who says, well, I don't care about Ukraine. I want Donald Trump to stand up for America? What do you say to them?
I don't know where you got that. I mean, I don't have time for it.
Yes, but we hear it. We hear it.
Here's the thing. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in a place where you thought the Russians were the good guys? What part of America did you grow up in where they taught you the Russians were the good guys and our allies were the bad guys? That's the flip here that we need to continue to remind people. The Russians are the bad guys. They're raping women. They're killing children. They're bombing cities. The Ukrainians are the noble good guys. In some ways, they're more American than we are over the last couple of years. And
Wow. More American than we are. Yes, you heard it from the news industry of this country. Now, back to the conflict of interest with weapons manufacturers. Who's making the money on this continued conflict? I miss the old Democrat Party. I miss the Democrat Party of 2004, the one that called out Vice President Dick Cheney's continued conflict of interest during the Iraq War. You see, while he was vice president, Dick Cheney, who formerly worked for Halliburton, continued to receive as much as $1 million a year in deferred compensation from Halliburton, an oil company. And he also enjoyed a seat at the table during the Bush administration's discussion over how to handle a post-war oil production in Iraq. My point here is to say that there was a time when Democrats pointed out this blatant hypocrisy and example of war profiteering, yet they seem to cheer it on when it comes to Ukraine. That, my friends, needs to be called out and exposed because the conflicts of interest do exist. Barron's reports that the Trump-Zelensky dust-up at the White House boosted defense stocks, and one of the big winners is a company named BAE. This is a United Kingdom company, a British multinational defense organization specializing in aerospace and security, offering advanced technology in the areas of defense, aerospace, and war. Also being reported from Business Insider, European defense stocks are soaring as European leaders commit to Ukraine's continued war effort against Russia on the heels of the White House dust-up. My friends, no matter where you are in the political aisle, war should not have an ROI, that is, a return on investment. But for some people, that's exactly what this conflict is about. Take, for instance, the case of Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell. I kid you not. He said the quiet part out loud and suggested that Ukrainian lives don't matter that much because we're killing a lot of Russians and decimating their military through this ongoing conflict. Watch.
Look around the world. Our biggest economic enemy is China. Our biggest geopolitical enemy is Russia. In a matter of 3 years, without losing a single U.S. soldier, we have decimated their military and their economy. It's been the greatest return on investment for any military expenditure ever. And as far as the return on investment for soldiers' lives, it's infinity because you can't divide zero.
Yikes. We do not send our best to Congress. In fact, we send some pretty zero-brained people. War should not have an ROI. And this anti-war stance that the Democrats used to have in 2004 when Iraq was going on and Afghanistan was going on and Bush was in the White House, it's non-existent now. Now they're all for it. And sometimes they're all for it simply because Trump is against it. And it needs to be exposed, as well as the anti-democratic policies currently being impacted in the nation of Ukraine at the hands of its current president, Zelensky. And let's not forget, the conflict of interest runs deep in the Democratic Party. There's a reason why Joe Biden pardoned Hunter retrospectively back to 2014, just before leaving office this past year. Hunter Biden was hired by a natural gas company in Ukraine named Burisma in 2014, though he had no experience in natural gas or in that country up to that point. So nothing to see here, except a boatload of corruption in Ukraine and with Ukraine at the hands of the leadership of the left side of the political aisle in this country. As Americans, we need to call it out. But as Christians, we can't afford to be oblivious to this blatant conflict of interest and corruption. And at the end of the day, overarching all of these discussions is the need to seek peace. Christians are called upon by the Lord to be peacemakers, to pray for peace, to seek peace, to, as far as it depends on us, live peacefully with all men. Now, Jesus said wars and rumors of wars will happen. These are the beginning of birth pains up until the end when he soon returns. In that case, yes, when we look at war, we can interpret it through the lens of Jesus' instructions in Matthew 24. He is coming, and one day peace will reign over this earth, and finally, all war will be abolished at the hands of the Prince of Peace. But until then, we should take the stance that God takes through the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel 18:32, I take no pleasure in the death of anyone, Russian or Ukrainian, declares the Lord. So turn and live. That's the episode. Thanks for being here. Got a lot of stuff coming up on the extra content for Dependables members. If you're interested in that extra content, join us at patreon.com/Tim Hatch Live. Would appreciate your support. For $10 a month, you can get that content right now. When you support us, we support Project Rescue and the American Bible Society. I hope this content has helped you, informed you, and given you a better spirit of discernment for the times in which we live. God bless.